Good evening.
Good evening.
Hello, welcome one and all. It's so good to see each and every one of you. I'm Father Josh Stevens, the rector here at St. John in the Wilderness, and it's a special Thursday in the first week of June as we begin our Summer Scholar series for 2025. So we're going to tell you a little bit more about that in a moment, but just a few announcements so that you know what is ahead. We will have our special visiting scholar with us for the next 3 or 4 weeks as we look at church history, controversies, and why they matter. We'll be meeting in this room and online on Sunday mornings during the 10 o'clock hour, and on Thursdays 5 o'clock for some food and fellowship, and then at 5:30 we'll get started going until about 6. So this runs until, I think the last session is June 25th. Every Sunday and Thursday coming up. And then a special option that we haven't had before is we also will have a men's and women's Bible study. We have a separate Bible study, but we'll do a mixed Bible study on Tuesdays at 3:30 on the Gospel of John. All of that is made possible by the endowment of St. John in the Wilderness. Your generosity makes this program possible, and our visiting scholar is making it possible as well. So I'm excited to introduce to you Dr. Craig Farmer, who comes to us from Pelagian University, and he has been teaching there for over 3 decades after getting his PhD from Duke University under Dr. Steinmetz, who was an incredible scholar that advocated for reading the Bible with those who have gone before you and studying it with the saints and those who have over the centuries done the very same work that we do as the church, where we're trying to understand, the story of God and how we live it out together as the body of Christ. Dr. Farmer is definitely he's reached the legend status at Milligan, and there's many great stories that I'll share a different story with you every time we meet of some of the fun things that he has done in teaching. But I think today we're talking about Pelagius, is that right? And so the story about Pelagius is once we were in the school cafeteria having lunch and with all the other students, and for some reason Dr. Farmer and I were eating lunch together, and I was probably trying to sound smart or something, but we were talking about the Pelagian Controversy, and I said something about how it was, it's a good thing we've got that behind us, or it's a good thing there's not any more Pelagians. And all I remember is that he stood up on the bench of the cafeteria and he said, "Behold, the Pelagians," as all these great Christian college students were surrounding us and all trying to earn their redemption as hard as possible. So there's lots of fun stories like that where he brought these really important matters to life, and I am excited for him to do that with you all here at St. John in the Wilderness. So without further ado, welcome Dr. Craig Farmer.
Hold this way. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Well, it's a pleasure to be with you. And before I say anything, I want to pass on greetings from Phil Kennison, who I'm sure you came to love. I think 2 summers in a row. And when they asked me to do this, I said, I don't want to go after Phil. He's too smart. He'll make me look bad. But I just want to tell you, I love Phil with all my heart. He's my dearest friend in the world. And I probably only have 3 or 4 friends. Friends are rare. They're rare commodities. But Phil would, without hesitation, take a bullet for me, and I would for him. He'll be putting he'll be shoveling dirt on my grave one day and taking care of my children. I've known Phil for over 40 years. We started in graduate school together, him in theology, me in church history, and we went to the same church in Durham, and somehow we ended up at the same little Cal College in East Tennessee, and our lives have been knit together in an amazing way. It almost makes you believe in God. So I just want to pass on his love for you. He just had surgery just this week to remove his thyroid. Thank you. Yeah, and the good news is he can still make noise with his vocal cords. So, yeah. So, I'm not going to say a whole lot about myself. You'll learn more about me as we're talking, because you'll hear about how I've been formed, and it's probably not the same way as we've all been formed in different ways, of course. But just before I get into the historical controversy, I want to say something about the title of the series. Josh asked me to come up with a title and for your website and all that, and so I landed on Church History Matters, which I liked because of the sort of double entendre, you know. Now, the first way of looking at it's not very interesting, church history stuff. But the second way of looking at it, if matters is a verb, then it's a sentence, right? Subject and verb. And it's a declaration that this matters. It's important. I think that's what we mean by matters. So why does it matter? And I just want to say a little bit about that. When we talk about church history the way I want to talk about it, we're talking about memory. And when we talk about memory, we're also talking about forgetting. Memory is a complicated subject, and it is so integral to who we are as human beings. I buried my father just this past December, and I'm probably not the only one in this room with a loved one who departed this world in one of the ugliest ways, with terrible dementia. I don't know if you can. Is it true that you can only diagnose Alzheimer's post-mortem, Rosanna? It's kind of a loosey-goosey. Yeah, but anyway, I mean, it was horrible. I mean, Dad wasn't Dad. It robbed him of who he was. You know, as we were tying him down in the hospital bed, restraints, and I'm trying to explain to the nursing staff, this is not my father. He's very gentle, loving. And they're having, so awful. Loss of memory. To lose memory is to lose self. You lose the person. So memory is really important, but memory is complicated because memory is also not just this sort of objective thing. Memory is motivated. In other words, memory serves our desires in a certain way. We choose to remember what we want to remember, and we choose to forget what we want to forget. And our brains are amazing at an ability to forget things that maybe we should forget. It's protecting us. But there's a kind of motivational memory. And it seems to me that there are kind of three ways that people do this when it comes to history. To talk about history and memory, we're talking about similar things, right? And I think we all know that in our current culture, history is contested. That's your history. What's my history? History can threaten us. And one of the strategies is simply to stick our fingers in our ears and say, I don't want to know, I don't want to know, don't tell me. Willful amnesia. I don't want to know. That's one strategy. Another strategy would be what you might call hypercriticism of the past. It's all a sewer, a cesspool of racism, sexism, homophobia, social injustice. That's all it has to teach us. It's a very negative way of posturing yourself to the past. And then there's another strategy. You might call it romanticizing, a sentimentalized approach to history, which we might use the word nostalgia. I need that history. All of these strategies are motivated by human needs. I need history to be a certain way so that I can be me. Does that make sense in a certain way? Okay, so, which I don't mean to throw a hand grenade at you, but church history is dangerous. It will mess with you, but it will mess with you in good ways if you have the courage. If you have the courage. I'm not interested in church history as a kind of antiquarian curiosity. I'm actually interested in church history because as a Christian, I believe something, and it's something we say in the Creed. We talk about the communion of saints, right? I believe in the communion of saints. You guys say the Creed in church, I assume? Yeah. Not in my church. We hate creeds in my church. Yeah. No creed but Christ. See, you're learning something about me here. But I actually think the doctrine of the communion of saints is a really important doctrine. And of course it means that we share something with all Christians, past, present, future, all over the world, right? It's a mystical communion. And church history is something where we say, we are going to have a conversation. We're going to honor the dead. We're going to honor people that have gone before us. We're going to open ourselves to listen. It's really not that scary because they're dead. It's a kind of one-way conversation. If they upset us, we can shut the book or turn off the computer, We have some control, but if we allow these voices, if we listen to them and allow us to, in our own minds, engage them in, why do you think of it that way? Do you have something to say to me? One of the Christian virtues, I believe, is gratitude. We need to be people who are grateful to those who have gone before us, who have done a lot of the hard work that needed to be done in thinking about who we are, who God is, what the world is, and we just take it for granted, right? We don't have to do all the hard work all over again. What's the word we use for this? Tradition. Now, I'm assuming that among you Whiskey-palians, tradition's not necessarily a bad word, right? But in the churches I grew up in, tradition. That's what those Roman Catholics, those Episcopalians, all those denominations, they have their tradition. We're just Bible people. We have no tradition. I actually was raised in that, but then I came to see that the statement that I have no tradition is itself a tradition that runs through history of people who claim to have no tradition. In other words, tradition is inescapable. We are all formed by it, explicitly, but more often implicitly. You know, I assume I don't know if you sing this tune, holy, 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 that's God in three persons, blessed. When I sing that tune and think, the doctrine of the Trinity, why do I do that? Did I work it out on my own? What verse in the New Testament would you point me to that explains that we have three equal persons, equal in divinity, all the language that is used to define the Orthodox understanding of the Trinity? These were people trying to make sense of what they saw in the Bible, even though it wasn't all spelled out for them. And it's not all spelled out, which is why certain people were trying to figure it out. And the church, in the wisdom of the Holy Spirit, I believe, said no. No to Arianism, no to Docetism, no, all those things we now call heresies. We can do so retrospectively, but we have to assume, it seems to me, a posture of humility and gratitude towards those who come before us. Not that we necessarily take everything they say as right or true, but we need to honor their voices to hear what they might possibly have to say to us. So there goes 20 minutes, right? And I haven't even gotten to the Pelagian Controversy. Did these not get passed out?
No. Well, here,
I don't know if you need them. I mainly did that for me, to keep me on track. Because as you can tell, I get off track.
the foundation's been laid.
Yeah, exactly. So, Pelagian is one of the most important early controversies in the church because it is squarely in the area of what we now sometimes call theological anthropology, which is the question of who am I? Who am I in relation to God, in relation to myself, in relation to the world? Who are we human beings? This controversy is centered on those kinds of questions. Who are we? And it has had lasting impact. It has divided Christians to this day. But the questions really are fundamental. Am I a free moral agent or not? Am I somehow flawed? If so, how? Am I free or bound? Do I know what it means to live a good life? What are we all looking for? Happiness. That's what Augustine thinks, to jump ahead. But don't get me started. That's a really difficult issue. What is happiness? Our culture, we are making ourselves desperately unhappy by pursuing happiness. The moment you start pursuing happiness, you just make yourself unhappy. Have you ever thought about the Declaration, what is it? Declaration of Independence. So, What are the fundamental unalienable rights? Life, liberty, and why isn't it just happiness? They didn't say the pursuit of life, the pursuit of liberty, but when they got to happiness, Jefferson and whoever helped him thought, oh, that's aiming too high. Aiming too high. I mean, can you imagine if it was just happiness? I'd be first in line saying, hey, my rights are not being honored. I am deeply unhappy. I demand my rights. Did someone have a question?
No, I was just going to say it was originally property.
That's right, in John Locke, right.
Well,
Yeah.
even in Jefferson's drafts.
Oh, right, because he read Locke, in the English tradition. But I shouldn't talk about the Declaration of Independence. I should talk about what's on. I may have to follow up on Sunday with some of this. So, how does the issue be? Let me begin with Pelagius, first of all. Who was he? Well, I don't want to spend a lot of time with biography, but the good thing is I don't need to because we don't know hardly anything. I put CA in front of his birth and death date. That means circa. That's our best guess. We think he was from Britain or Britannia, the Roman area, but we're not even sure where he comes from. People call him a monk. That may be anachronistic. We know he was ascetic. Do you know the difference between asceticism and being a monk? I mean, an ascetic is like a Christian who thinks, I must fast, I must pray hard every day, I must discipline my body. That's asceticism. And monks do that, of course, right? So maybe he was a monk, but we don't, if he was, he certainly wasn't a Benedictine monk. But anyway, context. I think that's on your sheet somewhere. We're on the twilight of the Roman Empire. It's coming to an end. When this controversy erupts. What is it, in 410 when Rome falls, right? Because of that, Pelagius, we know, leaves Rome, goes to Africa and gets embroiled in this controversy with Augustine. In a way, what I see in Pelagius is a protest about how things are going with Christianity. And how are things going? Well, Edict of Milan, help me with the date, is it 314, 13? Constantine says it's not illegal to be a Christian anymore. And then with, do I have those on the sheet? I don't. It was Justin, the Emperor Justin, who makes Nicene Christianity, help me, you historians, 380 something, the official religion of the empire. That happens. So what does that mean? In the 300s, Christianity has gone from this little sect of persecuted people to it's the establishment. And so we're getting a lot of conversions of convenience. And what comes with that, at least for Pelagius, and I don't think he's entirely wrong, is kind of moral complacency. Pelagius is what we might call a rigorist. He wants Christians to stand out from their world, to be morally upright. And what is he hearing? What's in the air? It's too hard to, oh, come on. Sermon on the Mount. Really? Have you read that? That's hard. I mean, if I try really hard, maybe I could keep Moses, but who can keep Jesus, for crying out loud? That's really hard. And there's also this thing in the air that we'll come back to, that somehow we've been tainted by sin. It made it really hard for us to be good people. And Pelagius hates that. Just quit your whining, quit your complaining. You can do it. God has given you a good human nature. You're just a bunch of spoiled brats. That's what Pelagius is essentially saying. We come into this world, according to Pelagius, untainted by any sort of primordial sin. We come in innocent. Now, he recognizes that people end up sinning and doing bad things, but they have no one to blame but themselves. And he thinks that if you say, well, no, I was born in this kind of corrupted condition, you're blaming God, essentially. Is God going to punish you for you coming into the world this way? You were born with freedom, with moral integrity. So quit your complaining. And he writes commentaries on Paul, the Pauline epistles, and I did put an excerpt from his letter to Demetrius. I go to 6 or 6:30. 6:30. Oh, thank goodness. Yeah. I just want to give you a snippet of this. Let's read it together. We cry out at God and say, this is too hard. This is too difficult. We cannot do it. We're only human and hindered by the weakness of the flesh. What blind madness. What blatant presumption. By doing this, we accuse the God of knowledge of a twofold ignorance. Ignorance of God's own creation and of God's own commands. It would be as if, forgetting the weakness of humanity, God's own creation, God had laid upon us commands which we were unable to bear. And at the same time, may God forgive us, we ascribe to the righteous one unrighteousness and cruelty to the Holy One. First, by complaining that God has commanded the impossible. Second, by imagining that some will be condemned by God for what they could not help. So that the blasphemy of it. God is thought of as seeking our punishment rather than our salvation. No one knows the extent of our strength better than the God who gave us that strength. God has not willed to command anything impossible, for God is righteous and will not condemn anyone for what they could not help, for God is holy. Now, I'm thinking that at least some of you are sitting there thinking, that sounds pretty good. There's a kind of good sense in Pelagius. And a lot of his contemporaries thought, this is good, we need to hear this. And Pelagius himself, even his enemies who were on Augustine's side, said, he's a good man. He lives a disciplined life. He's not off, fleecing the flock so he would have private jets to fly around. He's not like one of those. He is serious about living out Christianity. And he says, look, I'm just going to quote scripture to you. What does Jesus say? Matthew 5. Be perfect as your Father in heaven is perfect. Are you going to say, well, none of us can do that? Well, would God command us to do something that we cannot do? That would be to ascribe unfairness, injustice to God. What about Jesus saying, "Come to me, all you who are weary and heavy laden, I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you, for my yoke is easy. My burden is light." And then another favorite verse, 1 John. This is the love of God, that we keep his commandments, or his commands, and his commands are not burdensome. That's not Pelagius, that's Holy Scripture. So it's not like he's just crazy saying the things he does. But this erupts into an enormous controversy that occupies the last 25 years or so of Augustine's life, an enormous amount of writings. And so, what's the problem? How many of you know something about Augustine? A little? You've heard of him at least, right? I've been reading him, teaching him for years, and I still don't know whether to say Augustine or Augustine. But since I'm with Episcopalians, it sort of seems better to say Augustine. I don't know. But you know, the Latin way to pronounce his name was Augustinus. And Augustine is actually closer to that. So, I don't know. That issue will never be settled. He wrote a spiritual autobiography that some people have read called The Confessions, which talks about his journey to God. I'm not going to rehearse that with you, but I recommend it to you. Although I will say it's not an easy read. Not much in Augustine is easy. But some things are worth working at. And theology is one of those things. I have students at my school, I'm going to go off again, but they will say, "Oh, I don't want to hear all this difficult theology. Just leave me alone. Jesus loves me. The Bible tells me so. We don't need to go any further than that." And I want to say, yes, Jesus does love you, and that's so important. But is there anything more worth thinking really hard about than God and who he is and who we are? I mean, these same students think it's really fine to go into a science class and to have to think hard about the Krebs cycle, or the cis and trans isomer and all that stuff you thought you could forget now. But that's fine. That's science. That's, but theology, and there's a story for that too. I don't have time to go in. Why is it that we think we can expend our intellectual energy in certain fields, but when it comes to matters of faith, if you're thinking really hard, something's wrong with you. It's rooted in, I don't have time to tell you. I won't go into that. I wish I could. But so, Augustine, we find out in the Confessions that he lived with a mistress. We never know her name. A lot of historians just call her Una, U-N-A, because Augustine says in the Confessions she was the only one, Una, so people have called her Una. We do find out that they had a child, a son, who they gave the lovely name of Deodatus to, given by God, gift of God. But the meanderings of Augustine to a place where he finally is converted, and I won't use the active voice, I'll use the passive voice, because you have to when it comes to Augustine to get him right. He doesn't convert. He is converted. That's what we're getting at. How do we get saved? That's what we're getting at, And I grew up in this tradition where we sang, I have decided to follow Jesus. I bet you don't sing that on Sundays. Thanks be to God. Because that forms you. Who is the main person in charge of yourself? Me. I did it. I decided. Right? God offers the gift, but it's up to me ultimately. And let me just say, before I lay out Augustine's view, it may offend you, because Augustine's views offend our sense of our own autonomy. That's what they offend. But just, I think there's something deeply satisfying psychologically about what Augustine says, at least for me. Maybe not for you. So what does he say? First of all, he says, Pelagius, you have completely misunderstood what the gospel is. You don't know what sin is. And for Augustine, sin is more like a disease, an illness. It's not just I either choose to obey God or disobey God. It's not that simple. There is something like a sinful condition, which is why Augustine thinks we come into this world, there is something wrong with us. What is it? What is wrong with us? And of course, you know what we're talking about, the doctrine of original sin, which still divides people, and I'm not trying to upset anybody. I'm trying to lay out how Augustine sees what Adam and Eve did somehow affects the rest of us. And I think you can believe this whether or not you believe Adam and Eve were historical human beings, or whether it's a true story about who we are. I don't need to get into that. But what he says is that something very fundamental is wrong with us. It's very much related to the primordial rebellion of our forebears. We don't come into the world unstained by human rebellion against God. We're corrupted by something. Which is why, for Augustine, his favorite metaphor for the church, hospital. It's a hospital. We are all deeply sick, wounded people that need the grace that comes to us in the hospital of the church. You know what Pelagius's favorite metaphor for the church is? This won't surprise you. Gymnasium. We're going to go work out. So there are two different kind of ecclesiologies there. So I'm sort of scared about this, but I'm going to try. What has gone wrong with us? Okay. First of all, to understand what has gone wrong with us, we have to understand, according to Augustine, how God intended us to be. And in other words, what is our end point, our telos? What is the thing we were made for? We were created to love God. And who is God? God is love. And all of creation is created by love for love. We were created to love God supremely. But something has happened to us, Augustine says, and we don't. We love God in a certain way, but not in the way that God intended. And that's what I'm going to try and explain. It's kind of embarrassing to draw stick figures, but this is sexist to do a skirt. And I'm trying Okay, I shouldn't be. I don't know how to draw God. I don't know how to draw the world, but I'm going to do a cloud and the earth.
Cloud and what?
Earth.
Oh,
What?
cloud and the earth.
Cloud, earth. The world, spiritual things, God. How did God set things up? Well, he made a good world. God pronounces it good, right? He wants the world to be loved by human beings made in the image of God. Love. He wants them to love the world. It's a good world, beautiful world. Who could imagine a better world? Well, I can imagine one without mosquitoes and tsunamis, but that gets us down another trail. He also wants to be loved. God wants to be loved. But there are two basic kinds of love here, and this distinction is not without some difficulties, and if you see the difficulties, you can raise them. The world is to be loved with what Augustine calls love of use, or love of usefulness. And God is to be loved with what he calls amor frui, or love of enjoyment. Now, how are those two loves different? Oops, sorry. I hope I didn't break it. There we go. Yeah, like I said, the distinction has some issues, but basically, we come into the world, we're supposed to love in this way, to love God's good world. We love the world because of the way it brings certain gifts to us. But the amor frui is not, we don't love God because God is useful. We love God as an end in God's self. It's what the later scholastic theologians call amor Dei propter ipsum, love of God for God's own sake. Or they also call it amor Dei super omnia, love of God above all things. I don't love God because I get to go to heaven. I don't love God because I get blessed. I don't love God for any useful thing. I just love God supremely for who God is, love. But what has happened to human beings, according to Augustine, is that we are hardwired differently because of the primordial rebellion. The poles get switched. The poles get switched, and you can anticipate what I'm about to say. We now love the world with a love of enjoyment, and we love God with a love of use. And that's a real problem, Augustine says. How do you fix that? You love what you love. You can't just, with an act of your will, change that. You know, think about your children. Think about someone, we all have someone for whom you would readily take a bullet, someone you would die for. Now, as an act of will, for just a couple seconds, stop loving them. The gears don't turn. You love what you love because you love it. And you can't just simply, by an act of volition, will, change that. something has to happen. God must intervene. But, Augustine says, thanks be to God, that's the gospel. God does intervene. The God who is love intervenes to heal us, to reorient our loves the way they're supposed to be. Now, there's all kinds of other things I could talk about, but I want us to have some time for questions. But another big word that Augustine sort of gets everyone after him talking about is the word concupiscence. Do you know that word? Concupiscence.
Yes.
Any of you grow up on the King James Version of the Bible? It actually appears in the King James Version, I think in 4 different places. The thing is, Greek and Latin and Hebrew have different words for desire. And the Latin word cupiscentia, for those of you who have ever heard of it, you're thinking sex. And you're not wrong. Concupiscence. Because in some places in the New Testament, when that word or its Greek equivalent, epithumia, appears, it's translated lust. But it actually is not just about sex. Concupiscence is about disordered desires. And it's much... Augustine just thinks sex is a good example of it. But concupiscence is much broader. Why is sex a good example of it? Because it's a place where the will doesn't control the passion. I don't want to be sexually aroused, but I am. I want to be sexually aroused, but I can't. Where's my Viagra? I mean, there's something kind of broken there. And one of the things that Augustine says is, look, this is what happens to Christians. They're baptized as babies in his church and his period. And what happens? The guilt of original sin is actually forgiven in baptism. But what remains? Concupiscence. We are still being healed. That's the Christian life. To use a term that Augustine and later Luther used, they talk about the human will is incurvatus in se, bent in on itself. And it's in the church and in God's grace that our wills are bent outward to God the way they should be. And when we love God supremely, guess what? We love neighbor. We love self. But we love neighbor and self and God in the right way. But in order to do that, our will has to be healed by God's grace. It's a lot more complicated than I've made it sound. But that fundamentally is the divine life. End of story. A series of church councils basically says Augustine's right, Pelagius is wrong. And so here's the deal. No one in the Middle Ages up to Luther would ever say, yeah, I'm a Pelagius. I think Pelagius is on something. No, sorry. The church decided he's a heretic. He's not teaching the gospel. It would only be in our own time that people would just say, yeah, I like Pelagius. He's good. He's good. But that doesn't mean the temptation of Pelagius' ideas has remained with us. And even in the Middle Ages, when they're trying to figure out how is it that we get restored to friendship with God. See, that's the thing. If friendship has been broken with God, how does that get fixed? How does that get fixed? And Pelagius is always there, like the siren song. And in the Middle Ages, they develop a system of thinking about merits and how we merit the grace of God. I'll probably talk about that a little bit when I get to Luther. But I think I would like to stop my diarrhea of the mouth and let you say, sorry, that was a little too vivid. But I don't know. What do you think?
Anna has a question.
Was Pelagius still alive when they decided he was a heretic?
Yeah, we don't really know what happened to him. He seems to have gone off into the desert somewhere. I'm sure living a very holy life, huh?
I'm feeling sad for him.
Yeah. Well, he had a lot of friends. A lot of bishops thought, this guy's good. We need this. And there was no ad hominem. There was no personal attack on Pelagius' character from Augustine. Augustine knew his reputation. He just says, you're not getting what's wrong with us. There's something much more fundamental wrong with us. One of the issues that comes up is Pelagius is baptizing babies in his churches. Why are you doing that? Why? And don't get me wrong, Pelagius, in responding to Augustine, says, no, he knows the word grace is in the Bible. He's got to say, well, what is grace? If it's all our muscular strength, Pelagius says it's your strong human nature. He calls it created grace, natural grace. He says Scripture is a grace because it shows us what we need to do. All the examples of, like, holy Job. Pelagius loves Job. Unrighteous man. See? We see that the only way Adam's sin affects you, Pelagius says, is when you freely choose to imitate Adam and disobey. But the question that Pelagius does not answer is, if all human beings are in neutral and can either obey or disobey, then why 100% of the time through all of human history have people always gone one way? Because it's hard to get around verses like, for all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. It's hard to get around some of the language in the Psalms. I was conceived in sin. And even Pelagius sort of admits, yeah, basically everybody goes in that direction, but they didn't have to. They didn't have to.
Do we know, did the two of them ever meet or have, were they?
We don't know if they met in their letters back and forth and in their writings back and forth. Yeah.
In our time, do we have to view this as mutually exclusive, or can we pick a little knowledge from both these guys?
The old via media instinct. I've been trying to get ready for Episcopalian culture. What would the via media be?
We're fallen, but have been given the grace by God.
I do my best, let God do the rest.
Yeah.
What I always heard from preachers in my church is, well, God presents you the gift, but you got to take the wrapping paper off. It's a cooperative enterprise. Because God wouldn't be coercive. Maybe. A lot of people still think that way. But the question is, would I ever take the wrapping paper off? I love what I love. I love being God. I love being king of my own world. I love, I don't know.
Sandy?
One thing I haven't heard in this discussion, and I like it very much, but, we have God's grace, and we have ourselves to tend towards sin, but part of that temptation comes from Satan or the devil. And yes, it's complex, sometimes I choose to sin by myself, but many times I'm tempted also, and we never know how that interacts, but this is why we need the help of grace.
Mm-hmm.
It's why we can't do it on our own. We can't just choose. I've tried a good part of my life to choose to do right.
To do what?
To do right,
Oh.
to do good, but I'll be darned if I don't mess up. What? Really bad.
Well, I think, I put this on your sheet. I have 4 minutes here. The Romans 7 passage. I don't know how you guys make sense of that. Where Paul, the apostle, says, I do not understand what I am doing. For I'm not practicing what I want to do, but I do the very thing I hate.
Yes, that's life.
However, if I do the very thing that I do not want to do, I agree with the law that the law is good. But now no longer am I the one doing it, but sin that dwells in me. For the good that I want, I do not do, but I practice the very evil that I do not want. This is the divided self. And it's a very difficult passage that still divides not only Christians from different traditions, it divides biblical scholars. Is this really autobiography from Paul? Or is he talking about his life as a Pharisee before his conversion? I think most people actually think, or I'm not sure if it's true to say most people, let me be clear. It resonates with me personally, Craig Farmer, that there's still a struggle within me in terms of my own desires and loves. And we live in a culture of abundance that has turned us all into automaton consumers. The word consumer has become synonymous with human being. Consumption, that's what we were created for. Like a Pac-Man. And we are endless consumers. And we get that rush when we hit purchase on Amazon. And then the package comes and it's like, I need to go do it again. And that endless consumption is feeding off our twisted desires, which are ultimately what? To find God, happiness in God. And we're trying to get our way to it, and we think our love of the world is somehow going to do that for us. The gospel of consumption, economists talk about that. They have to make us dissatisfied so we'll purchase the next thing. What do they call it? Perceived obsolescence.
Planned obsolescence.
Huh?
Planned obsolescence.
Planned obsolescence is like you got it. And Ford and other people realized, hey, if we make things too good, we're destroying ourselves. We gotta make things to break. And then perceived obsolescence is like we got to tell people this is the greatest iPhone you're ever going to have. And then next year we're going to say, oh, you shouldn't be happy with that. You need the new. I thought I was fine with this. It's all playing off those inner things that Augustine is talking about. What were we made for? Love of God and what Augustine calls rest. We fill our lives with noise and purchasing and hustle and bustle. We measure our worth by utility. Am I being useful today? Oh, I was worthless today. I didn't do anything. We use economic metaphors about time. How did you spend your time? Oh, I wasted my time. You're just going to sit and meditate? What a waste of your precious time. And we've been captured by all of that. Me. I'm talking about me. I don't know about you. I shouldn't assume that that's true. But what does Augustine say? And I'll close with this because I've just gone over it. Our hearts are restless until they rest in you, O God. I think the fuller quote is, O God, you have made us for yourself, and our hearts are restless, unhappy, until they rest in you. The idea that stillness is where true happiness is found, that's so countercultural right now. I tell my students, hey, can you imagine going to your room, no phone, no computer, no music, no books, you just sit there and do nothing? They have a word for it. What is that called? Something dogging. Raw dogging.
Oh, yeah.
But which also means like sex without a condom. But they have used it to mean like, man, I was just in my room raw dogging it.
Maybe it were.
Maybe. But there's something really important at stake in this debate. Because I think we all care about finding ourselves in the right place. I'm getting, as I hit 64 this year, I guess I'm ever more cognizant of finitude. And and the reason I would still want to stay in the classroom a little bit more is it's like I want to tell my students, hey, you don't have to live the corrupt life I've lived. You could do better. Don't be corrupted by the culture around you. Where is life found? Because that's what Jesus promises, right? I come that you might have life and really, what could that look like? Well, it might surprise us to think about it. Thank you.